Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah's Psachim, Parak Ches, chapter 8, Mishna Gimel, Mishnah 3. We're going to do 3 and 4 today. Gimel and Daled. Ha'imar Labanov, a person who says to his sons, his children, Hareini shoichet esa Pesach, I am slaughtering the carbon Pesach, al mi she'al mikem rishon Yerushalayim, for the one who gets to Yerushalayim first. Now what's happening is like this. He's going to be shechting his carbon Pesach. His sons are arriving in Yerushalayim. They're coming a little bit later. And by the time they come, it's going to be after this carbon Pesach is slaughtered. So he says to them that the first one of you who gets to Yerushalayim, I'm shechting the carbon Pesach for him. Now, his goal, but let's finish the Mishnah first, now we'll get more of an understanding. Once the first one has his head and most of his body entering Yerushalayim, that's considered like he's entered. Zacha bechelkai, he acquires his portion, and he acquires a portion for his brothers along with him. Meaning, when this person says, the first one who gets here, the first one that comes to Yerushalayim, I am shechting the carbon Pesach for him. It does not, the father does not mean to exclude his other sons. He means he's including them all. But he wants them to get there early. He wants them to get there. He wants to get them to move themselves and make sure they're there on time. He wants them to get quicker. He wants them to come in quicker to Yerushalayim. He wants them coming quicker to do the mitzvah of carbon Pesach. So what does he do? He basically says that whoever is first, he is the person who gets, he's the person who's in charge. He's going to be in the head of things, which means when it comes to choosing a portion of the carbon Pesach, he will choose his own, and then he will give the other ones their portion. Basically, he's being put in charge of dividing up the carbon Pesach. So when he says, whoever comes first, I am shechting the carbon Pesach for him, doesn't mean only for him to exclude his brothers, not to be included in the carbon Pesach. But it means that he's making him the head of dividing things up, which means that he will choose his own portion first, and then he chooses everyone, he divides up everyone else's portion for them. And the point is, and the Mishnah also says that once the first one gets his head and the majority of his body into Yerushalayim, although he hasn't completely gotten into Yerushalayim yet, that's called he's in, he's the winner. But the point of the Mishnah is that although he said, I'm shechting it for the one who gets in first, it doesn't mean to exclude the rest of them from the carbon Pesach. It just means that he will be the one who's going to be in charge of dividing it up. Next part. Nimnin alav. You could continue including people until you have a kazayas of meat for each one. Meaning you can include as many people as you want, but only as long as each person participating get a kazayas of meat. That's the minimum amount you need to eat for the mitzvah, and therefore, as long as everybody can get a kazayas of meat, or meaning a kazayas of edible part of the carbon Pesach, you can continue including people as long as each person is going to get a kazayas. Nimnin u'meishchen es yedeya mimenu ad sheyeshachet. You can include or withdraw from it until it's shechted. Meaning, let's say the first part of the Mishnah is that when's the deadline? When you're talking about including people in the carbon Pesach, up to when can you do that? What's the deadline for that? The deadline for that is shechita, slaughtering the animal. By the time the animal is slaughtered for the carbon Pesach, whoever wants to eat the carbon Pesach has to be registered. After that, they cannot register on it. Another halacha is that if, let's say, before the animal is slaughtered, I register myself on a carbon, and then I want to withdraw from that carbon and join somebody else. You can do that. You want to withdraw from the carbon that you registered on, and you want to join a different one. You can do that also until the animal is slaughtered. Once the animal is slaughtered, once the carbon Pesach is shechted, you cannot withdraw. So both being included and withdrawing can only be done until the animal is shechted. Rabbi Shimon says, when it comes to withdrawing from the carbon Pesach, Rabbi Shimon holds you have until the blood is sprinkled. As we learned before, the animal is slaughtered. the blood is received, and then it's thrown on the wall of the Mizbeach. According to Reb Shimon, until that blood is thrown onto the wall of the altar, you can withdraw and join a different one. Okay? But even according to Reb Shimon, you can only join a Carbon Pesach until it's slaughtered. So let's say you came to a point, according to Reb Shimon, you were registered on Carbon Pesach A, and then the blood and the animal was slaughtered, and then before it was sprinkled, you withdrew, and then you joined another group that its animal was not yet slaughtered. It works. He withdrew, and he joined a new one. Because even though when Reb Shimon says until the blood is thrown, that only means regarding withdrawing. Withdrawing has up to the point that has even past the slaughtering, even when until the blood is sprinkled. Joining, though, you can only join until the animal is slaughtered. Okay, Mishna Dalet. Hamamana imay acherim bechelkai. One who includes other people in his portion. Now, what's happening is like this. The halacha is that, as we've said, people can eat one Carbon Pesach in different groups. Okay, let me read you for the introduction. Normally, when a group of people register on a Pesach offering, there is an understanding that they will all eat the offering together as one group. Thus, if one part of the group decides that they want to eat alone, which they could, because we learned previously, you could go ahead and have two groups on one Carbon Pesach. They may not force the others to leave and eat somewhere else as a different group. Meaning, if we started off together, and then, we started off together, and then, some decide, no, we want to eat it by ourselves. Could you please go somewhere else? The answer is they can't make you do that. They have no right to make you do that. They want to go somewhere else and eat. They could do that because two groups, and even in two different places, can eat from one Carbon Pesach. But now we have a case where there's going to be an exception to that. And that's this case, which is Hamamana imay acherim bechelkai. He includes others in his portion. So that means like this. You have, let's say there was a Carbon Pesach, and 10 people registered for it, which means each person gets a tenth. Now, one of them invites other people to join. Now, he cannot make them full members of this Carbon Pesach because the other ones never agreed to it. But he could include them in his portion. He has his 1/10. And if he wants to now bring other people in to eat from his 1/10, and as long as everybody has a kazayas, it works. It can work. However, if that's what happens, Rashayin b'nei Chabura, the other members of the original group are allowed litan lo yashalai, to give him his portion, and he eats his own in one place, and they eat from theirs in another place. That means that if you started off as a group, and then one of them included other people that the other members of the group did not agree to, they never consented to, when it comes time to eat the Carbon Pesach, the other members of the group will say to this person, look, we originally didn't want these guys. We're not interested in eating with them. You have your portion and you invited them. Take your portion and take them and go somewhere else to eat it. And we're staying here. Then they're allowed to do that. Because since the original group that was made up did not consist of those people, so there was never an assumption that they agreed to eat with them, then they have a right to say that, look, we never agreed to eat with them. We don't want to eat with them. You have your portion and you're going to give it to them. Take your portion and go somewhere else. You're allowed to do that. Even so, the point is that typically you can't go ahead and force them to do that. But in these, because when they started off, the assumption is they're all eating together. So you can't say go somewhere else. But when there was no assumption because they weren't really part of the original group or they weren't part of the whole group, just that one invited them onto their portion, then already they can go in and say, go somewhere else. And there's no problem going somewhere else because on one Carbon Pesach, two groups can eat from one Carbon Pesach. And you can have a Carbon Pesach group of people registered on it. They can separate as different groups. They can even go into different places. The point of our Mishnah is that in this case, they could actually force the other group to go because they weren't part of the original setup. Have a wonderful day.
I think you should be friendly with everyone with different